glad to be here today, representing UNICEF and representing youth in Foresight as well. So my journey wasn't traditional at all in Foresight. It's almost more than 3 years of remote work and self-studying. I couldn't even translate the name of the field that I'm working in, which is Foresight, into Arabic for my family and friends. What inspires me in this field was actually my father, who used to work in strategic planning in Ministry of Healthcare in KSA. A personal snippet is that he is a hard of hearing person. So he had a lot of resistance that I learned from and that I bring to the Foresight field as well. My journey started with UNDP Regional Office, our fellowship in Futures Thinking. And after the end of this fellowship, I was really curious to delve in this Foresight field. And unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to join an academic degree or master degree that's directly focused in Foresight. It's not available yet in Egypt. And also, I didn't have the chance to join a think tank that's directly focused on Foresight. So my plan B was to search for online scholarships. And I was lucky enough and supported by Foresight organizations like the School of Futures, Meet the Futures, and so on in this journey. And after that, I was glad to work on 2 interesting projects with UNDP Accelerator Labs. The first one was done in Egypt with UNDP Egypt, targeting the future of women in agriculture and energy sector in 2050. And the second one was with, as I was a part of a global team in UNDP Uzbekistan, targeting also the green transition of Uzbekistan. And after those 2 projects, I joined UNICEF and the group of new cohort of fellows as a representative of the MENA region. And in the 2nd year now, I'm actually acting as a senior fellow to support new cohort of fellows who are building their Foresight skills. So I'm trying to change the narrative from being unable to access Foresight to promoting Foresight among young leaders.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. California thinks of itself as a nation state. In fact, I think our governor has said it a few times. And really, in many ways, California is seen as a trendsetter in ways, people may disagree with whether we're a trendsetter for good or not. But this was the first major attempt in the United States to do something at a scale that is as large as a state. And what we had to do, part of the challenge was to build a research case for it, to build a public case for it, as well as a government case for it. We tried to do it, over 2 years and change. I think we succeeded to some extent. I just want to show a few slides from some of the work we did. This was an example. It's hard to do 100-year scenarios. It's a lot of things start failing in terms of even the most kind of ambitious ways to think about scenarios. But this was one example of trying to portray a potential aspirational vision that still leaves a lot of details to be filled in terms of what different research communities as well as others might try to do. One of the hallmark features of what we did and part of this conversation was to engage artists and young people. So we had 45 youth fellows throughout the university systems in California, University of California, private universities, as well as the Cal State system. And we had a major event in Sacramento in front of the state capitol. What you see here was the calm before the storm. It was during an entire week of rainstorms. And in fact, you'll see later on, it started raining pretty hard, but we still had 500 people who showed up in front of the Capitol that we'd been engaging with over the course of several months. We also had an intergenerational commission. So we tackled, California had a Future of Work Commission. We called ourselves, as a nickname, Future of Everything Commission. So we had 15 issue areas that we tackled simultaneously. We had 26 commissioners, half of them under the age of 45. That was really important to have that kind of two-way flow of expertise and mentorship. But a major part of what we did, and this is important, before our Intergenerational Commission put out its vision and roadmap for the future, we put out what we call the Youth Manifesto, right? So we had these 45 fellows, plus youth-serving organizations throughout the state, including those working with formerly incarcerated populations, those working with Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander populations, Native American populations. And this was a Native American artist who took key planks in that youth manifesto and did it, portrayed it in digital form. It was a moment to celebrate as well, right? So especially in California and many other states in the US, people are now doing land acknowledgements, which is an important step, that the people still exist. Their culture still exists. In fact, we have so much to learn, and that's been part of our learning through this California work, that when you talk about people being good ancestors, people thinking multiple generations, well, the communities have been doing this for centuries. And so there's a lot that we can learn through partnership. And so it was a time of celebration. I mean, the manifesto building had occurred over several months, and we came together, and it was about imagining better futures and also getting people to commit to better futures. And there are groups like CalPERG. This is the Public Interest Research Group. This is what Ralph Nader started decades ago. Different states have different PERGs. And it was really, to me, humbling. I'm relatively new to futures work. I've been doing this for like 2 years and change. CalPERG, they came up with their 2030 goals in 2018, and they're sticking with it through the pandemic. And they've already made some headway on things like plastic bans, getting the University of California system and certain municipalities to do that. We also had a future summit in Southern California. We had 300 high school students come, and to really give them the ability to open up their imaginations. You would think with the young people, they would be the most primed to do this, but many of them are in schools where they don't have much in the way of guidance counseling, and really their options get narrowed very, very quickly. So part of it is to find a way. We had members of Congress come and address these folks and to listen to their ideas. You can go to California100.org, where we have many documents that come out of this. Key to that is not only our vision and manifesto documents, but also toolkits. So you'll see a Youth Futures Manifesto toolkit there, and you'll also see other toolkits that we generated, including with School of International Futures. And I'm happy to join SWAF now as strategy lead for the Americas to try to expand this work to other states.
Referring to my experience with UNDP Egypt, the project was targeting the future of women in agriculture and energy sector in 2050. And let me share with you some facts about this project and the cultural context. So farmers are hyperactive. They need immediate solutions, and they don't want to feel like overly hopeful about the future. They also think, like some of them think, it's haram, which means religiously wrong, to think about the future. It lies in hands of God, which is totally wrong. And the second thing also is they don't give women safe space to voice their challenges out loud. Although women throughout the history of Egypt are key players in agriculture sector. And the third thing that we worked also with different stakeholders. It wasn't just farmers. We worked also with researchers, NGOs, and businessmen who were totally new to Foresight. Some of them think there's a bias to focus only during this research on women. In spite of all these challenges, almost all of the participants find the Foresight experience mind-blowing and eye-opening. So what I learned through this experience was the importance of the language that we use. So when we are dealing with farmers, we have only to stick to Arabic language. We can't say any terminology in English, whether it is Foresight jargon or English terminologies that we use in general. Also, we have to speak their slang language. We have to use their idioms. We have to play the games that they are used to in their cultural context, so that we are building trust. We are not just translating. We need to get this buy-in from the farmers. And dealing with other stakeholders was totally different, because I can use English when I talk with NGOs and researchers and businessmen. However, all of them needed to experience this future literacy, and also all of them need to see the big picture that we are seeing as Foresight facilitators. So what I learned from the experience with UNDP Egypt, I'm actually bringing it now to the UNICEF fellowship, as I am supporting the new cohort of fellows while building a new curriculum that's jargon-free and that's also focusing on contextualizing the curriculum for youth, and also mentoring them on supporting the national offices of UNICEF as they are going to design their own Foresight projects.
Well, first, I'll just, as they say, I'll double click on the avoiding jargon part, and I think that was one of the ways we did it. We learned over time in terms of what worked in our, I guess you could say, cultural and political context. One of the tools we used, whether it be high school students or new members of the California State Assembly, which was to do a news headline exercise, right? And so when you're talking about, a news headline 10 years, 15 years down the road, that was actually very effective talking to these freshman legislators, because given term limits in California, they can expect to serve 12 years. So one of the things I said is, like, think about what you want your news headlines to be by the time you're done, and what it's going to take, but also thinking about all the challenges along the way. California is more left than many other states, and it's also Democrats have a supermajority there, so they can push things through in ways that they can't. Neither party can push in Congress, just given how closely divided it is. That said, there is political diversity in the state. There's regional diversity, racial diversity that translates into politics. And so we not only had an intergenerational commission, and we have one of our commissioners in the room, Edgar Ibarra, who is continuing on this work under this new entity called Youth Futures Movement California. When it comes to young people, they are much more aligned in their views than older folks. But even among older folks, we did these deliberative democracy exercises with Stanford University, conducting them. And there were some surprising areas of agreement, including on mental health and the need to do something about it. It's a major issue in California. And that's where you saw Republicans, independents, and Democrats all on the same page. Now, there's some other issues in which the young people were much bolder. And I think that's just so critical. So one of our recommendations that even the Intergenerational Commission came up with is to mandate every board and commission in California to have at least one person under the age of 35. Right? And this is like, we have to find a way to make this permanent in terms of having those voices represented. We can't just count on these initiatives to sprout up from time to time. Youth Futures Movement is going to try to come back every year and update that manifesto, but we have to make it part of the agenda setting process within government. And that's one of the things I would say for many countries that are experiencing aging populations and declining youth populations, really that should be like a flashing red light. That is a danger when you have societies that are not doing the work necessary to build the next generation of leaders and to get their design into policy as quickly as possible.
Actually, what we need as youth Foresight practitioners is to have safe spaces so our voices are heard and respected. And let me share with you a story that I actually had with UNDP Pakistan. As I was part of the global team of scanners, I asked them, so why are not you considering agritourism for the green transition of Pakistan? And the first reaction I got was resistance. Although I was in a room full of futurists, they told me it's Islamic country and they are not used and they are not open to tourism at all. So how are we going to introduce agritourism? But after some time, one of those futurists said, let's talk about Nurhan's suggestion. So at this moment, I feel that he gave me a safe space. And let's agree that any foresight practitioner should be used to not gaining the buy-in always. So we build resilience. We are not always expecting to get this traction. But what I learned from my experience in UNDP Uzbekistan is actually what I'm bringing now to the new cohort of fellows. I'm trying, along with my fellow fellows, to build this safe space for those young leaders, because they are also starting their journey in building their foresight skills. So safe space here is crucial. It allows them to voice their ideas out loud and to feel that they are supported along the way. And this is how we actually do meaningful youth engagement. And this is our belief that we work on in UNICEF, and that's also something that you can see tomorrow in our session while we are launching our youth playbook, which includes a lot of activities. So it's not a theoretical book, it's jargon-free and also include activities that you can work on as a youth or as someone who is leading youth organizations.
Well, they did to some extent, right? So one of the things I would say, the kind of, in addition to running California 100 for a couple of years, I serve on the board of the California Endowment, which is one of the biggest philanthropies in California. It's a health conversion foundation, but for the last decade or more, investing pretty heavily in power building and youth empowerment and systems change and long-term investment, right? So investing in places and in organizations for many years. That's one of the things I would say is a lesson learned. So we did gain some traction with the Strategic Growth Council in California. So so check out our toolkits. And it might seem like a cop-out to be like, we built toolkits. Well, some of those toolkits were important, and we called that first toolkit Strategic Foresight for Decision Makers because we wanted to use language that people were familiar with. Some people may not like this notion of frame it as strategic foresight, but for us, we said this is next level strategic planning. So it's actually interesting when you talked about your dad and what he did, right? To kind of build that conceptual bridge for people where it does. Government is inherently risk averse, so you gotta start building those conceptual bridges for that to seem more familiar. My only regret is that we did not have many years of continual funding, because someone like the Strategic Growth Council, they were looking to California 100 as a partner, but we were by design something that was, we did a lot in 2.5 years, but really I think what would have gone the distance is a multi-year commitment to start getting it on in. But I am hopeful, right? So with these toolkits, in public policy analysis, John Kingdon has a multiple streams approach. Think of futurists as policy entrepreneurs, like we've built the solutions and we're just waiting for the right moment. Sometimes we can accelerate those moments. So having young voices and youth power building is an important way to shift that political stream that John Kingdon talks about, right? But there's the problem stream, which I think is actually very fortuitous for foresight. Like when you talk about climate chaos, right? And artificial intelligence, those are two major ongoing disruptive forces that I think make the problem case for foresight very well, right? So you have the problem stream, you have the politics stream, and then you need to essentially have the solution stream and the entrepreneurs lying in wait. So I think it's a political stream that's critical. This is where I think philanthropy can come in if there isn't enough buy-in. There is no way, I think, ultimately, regardless of what kind of political system you're talking about, if the people are not bought in, right? If stakeholders are not bought in and everyday people. And ultimately, it is the fact that you were in the room and can speak up, and then someone else can be your ally to say, hey, why aren't we looking at this? That is so critical. And that was some of the key lessons I have learned in my scholarship, but even in the work in the California Endowment. Young people are the ones who ask, why not? Right? And they will not take no for an answer. But the key is you have to find ways to institutionalize it or make that presence regularly felt. So it's just not seen as a one-off.
Hello, thank you very much for the great session. My name is Diana. I'm from Jordan. I did the UNDP Youth Futures Fellowship for the Arab States. I'm wondering about the monitoring and evaluation aspect of forecasts. If you can tell us a little bit more about that.
This is a great question, Diana, and I'm glad to see you here today. Diana was used to be my fellow in the UNDP Arab region. So actually, it's crucial to monitor and evaluate the Foresight work that we are doing. In UNICEF, we are keen on taking feedback from the global youth-led workshops that we are doing, and we are enhancing our work along the way. The framework that we work within is developing along the way. We are co-designing this program together, which allows us to play a key role as youth in the strategy and the design of this agenda. So it's not just something that is placed from the early beginning and we are implementing. No, we are learning a lot along the process, either in the first year as a first cohort of fellows, or now as we are building new curriculum with fellows. And also during Dubai Forum, we have a session which is held by Dr. John Sweeney and Dr. Serene about the monitoring and evaluation that I would recommend you to join because they are also suggesting new ways to do this monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah, the quick thing I'll just say on that, I thought you had said forecast. I was like, we didn't do forecasting. But in terms of foresight, I think it's important to figure out what aspects of the evaluation are tied to particular topical areas versus more general things. So we had one of the things with California 100, and I think with most collective work, what I've learned over time is to find agreement on what are the core values that you're going to hold on to. Because foresight work is fundamentally about navigating uncertainty, right? And massive uncertainty and volatility. I think of core values as one of the things you can hold on to, regardless of what scenario you find yourself in, right? And to think critically about that. So if part of it is about resilience, one of my kind of side gigs as an academic is try to get more concrete about concepts that we all love to hear, like sustainability. I think there's a lot of work there that's happened. Resilience, it's still early stages in terms of systematizing what does it mean to have systems that are resilient, right? And even inclusion. A lot of times people confuse inclusion with other things, and there's no good agreed upon standard. So I think it is vital for us to start creating indicators for some of these process measures that are still fairly vague, and to find ways to have some level of standardization, but also the ability to customize based on context.
So just a quick question. I work with youth in Kenya, and one of the biggest challenges they say is intergenerational communication. They have the energy and enthusiasm, and then the elders in the community, the 67-year-olds, have the power, the position, and so forth. But when you talk to the elders, they're like, we're scared. We don't know what the future is going to hold. So I think there's a good opportunity. But what are your thoughts on how do we practically facilitate bridging that gap? Even though we think that it's there, it's maybe not.
Thank you so much. CY from Public Good Design from Think Place. Thank you for that conversation. I work in participatory futures, so this has been a treat. My question is mainly around the practicalities of working with intergenerational, designing for intergenerational considerations. In my work with OECD governments, I find that argument for thinking about future generations very powerful. I suppose when you're interacting with the social instruments of policy, but it runs up against barriers and challenges when we start talking about the economic instruments of policy making. I dare say that there's still a focus on and I'm happy for you to disagree, but I feel like there's still a focus on present value and a discount on future value and the perspectives of future generations. So I'm just really curious to ask you and explore, how do we, perhaps that builds on the previous question as well, how do we manage that? How do we work through that?
One thing I was going to ask actually at some point to ask Edgar, one of our youth commissioners, to say something to this point, because I think it is a really, a lot of that, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head in terms of fear. And I mean, Edgar, you've talked about it within your organization, how you're trying to bring these perspectives, but elders within your organization see it as a risk, right? In terms of like completely changing how the organization approaches the work, and they work with formerly incarcerated populations. So I don't know the answer to that, and I think someone like Edgar may have a better answer to that than I do. But in terms of discounting rate, that's something that I think there are some places that are trying to make changes there. But that's even something, my hope on something like intergenerational fairness assessments is to, it's kind of this toolkit that we have is like Peter Drucker saying, like, what gets measured gets done, right? So at some point with these government agency folks, you need to know how to score. And Sophie, you did some of that work. Like, how do you go about the business of scoring and where to discount? It's kind of very arcane, but so consequential. But I think we're still early stages in doing the case making for that, especially when kind of the standard kind of standard economics kind of dominant thinking, right? Long run, we're all dead. You have like a very steep discount rate. I think there are changes afoot when it comes to infrastructure investments and thinking about climate and on what that means, but it's still in the early stages.
I feel you, because when you are talking about the economic conditions and the challenges, this is a place where I come from. Africa and Asia, Egypt, we face similar challenges, right? I think, we are still in early stages, to monitor and to put these indicators. However, we have a great opportunity here to build awareness, to create more spaces for future literacy. It's crucial to build this education and this awareness, so you have a new generation who are holding this futurist mindset. Yes, it's good to have indicators to validate what you are working on, but we need the awareness to be created in the first place. So this younger generation are able to shape their own futures and to face those crises and to get solutions that are actually evaluated.
Thank you so much for the session and the impact that you're creating. My question is related to, so I work in public services. I'm a service designer, and I work with smart services like smart cities, smart government, that kind of thing. So like, I'm kind of trying to bring this futures literacy in what I'm doing. And I'm mostly dealing with like technical people and like technical designers, and they're really afraid of think about the future in that way. So, and our future is not like 10 years. Like, I think we're speaking mostly about like 3 years, 5 years maximum. So what would you suggest to break this, this like fear? And also, I wanted to work on like teaching the younger generations of designers and like technical engineers who work in digital and transformation. How can we break this fear of talking about the future for these generations?
So quickly, I was going to say, actually, yeah, and I think this partly is about the elders and young folks too. And we did this a little bit with our commissioners and folks at the Youth Summit. It was those experiments. It was actually in the kind of urban planning context in Japan, in which you get young people and older people part of as kind of this artificial experimental cohort, right? And that's something that planners are used to in terms of design exercises and charrettes, but it's a very different twist on it. And role playing, right? And this is where I think we could take it away from people's kind of lived, embodied current identities and to actually build that intergenerational, when you randomly assign people of different generations into a future cohort and a current cohort, you you can start getting there. So I think that's one way to do it. Another thing, and this is something I don't know, with designers, like I presented at this American Planning Association California chapter meeting. I thought, wow, so planners, they would surely be most open to this. And most of them were like, we have all these regulations we have to comply with that we don't have time to get creative. I was like, are you crazy? Like, you're planners. Like, you would be the most natural people to do this. So I think we have to change all of these systems. Maybe technology can make a difference. So part of the thing is, like, we have all these like augmented reality tools now. So why do you have to wait for a particular 3-dimensional model of what an urban center needs to look like? Why not get young people, or just everyone really, part of that design exercise? So I think there are possibilities here. People need to experiment more. And that way, I think it kind of reduces some of the fear, hopefully, that maybe they'll try it and they'll enjoy it.
Actually, creatives are one of the personas that are still missed in the Foresight field. Although, let's think outside the Foresight field itself. Creatives in their own work are long-term visionaries. Either they recognize it or not. They are driving change through history, right? So the easiest way to engage them more in this work is through storytelling. Storytelling resonates with creatives and resonates with people coming from different backgrounds and speaking different languages. And the second thing that actually I tried with a new cohort of fellows and it worked very well was the personal futures triangle. So I brought this experiment with them while contextualizing it with a work-life balance wheel. So they felt like this future is tangible. It's something that they belong to, that speaks to them. So when you tell them, now try to think about the future of blah, 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 education, children, whatever. So they have experienced it personally. They know the true value of the future's work. So they are more engaged.
One thing I see as a huge organizing moment, I think when the UN kind of steps in a major way, it's a kind of validator. So I'm going to use it in terms of trying to spread that work in not only the US, but different parts of the Americas, to say, like, here we have an incredible opportunity. Of course, maybe expectations are running sky high, and what happens at that summit itself might not meet everyone's expectations, but let's collect all of that energy and actually organize an ecosystem around it and keep it going. And so that's what I am personally committed to. So that's one final thing I'll say. When it comes to all of this visioning, foresight, strategy work, one of the things we did with California 100, both with our youth manifesto and our vision roadmap, is that we could do strategy all day, but if there's no commitment behind it, it's like ultimately a fun exercise to do. Maybe you change things at the margins, but really, I think the key in this September, it might be too early to figure out what are the commitments that will start flowing from that. But we have COP coming up right after this, right? Can we imagine something regularly, either with the Dubai Futures Forum or with something like the UN, where it becomes an annual exercise where you start renewing and strengthening and tracking commitments and implementation over time? That would be my wish.
Actually, it's a great opportunity to talk now about the UN Summit of Futures. And I think we have a great opportunity to work through the UN because we can leverage its network and its accumulative experiences with many countries around the world. So what I wish to see is the culture shifts that takes place in the UN system and in governments all over the world to introduce new systems. So to reflect this on the UN, I wish to see UN youth delegates from each country and connections that happens between the UN delegates at the UN permanent missions. This will help us to bring more youth engagement and participation in the youth foresight field and to have more spaces for advocacy in the foresight field itself. So I can't say it out loud that youth, children, and even the children who are not born yet wish and want to see sustained future that they own, future that speaks to them.
Okay, one final thing I'll say, and this is stuff that I bring as a researcher from outside of Foresight, but hopefully it'll help all of you. It's very simple. It's this model that we call DNA, which is data, narrative, action. Right? So you can think of data and research and even all these exercises, that's kind of building the research base for it. Narrative is storytelling is part of it, but it's a lot deeper too, right? It's about mindsets and that mindset shift. But then finally, it has to be action oriented. If not, then really we're not going to succeed.
Thank you, and thanks a lot, Sophie, for mentioning the Summit of the Future. And it was great to hear your thoughts, and thanks for this amazing session, which is extremely thought-stimulating. So yeah, just a few words on the Summit of the Future specifically. I think you precisely in this discussion pointed out all the challenges that are here before we manage to actually reach all these agreements for future generations. And I loved what you said about the jargoning and finding common language, because it's exactly about finding a common language for all member states to agree on something, take commitments, and move forward. And obviously, we cannot stick to one. We need to find the right words that are going to fit for everybody. So just one word on that, because it's a long process, it's a complicated process. But one thing that is really missing here is member states to know, to not being risk averse, to know that it's already out there. We're not asking them to do something from scratch. You are doing it. So it's about just bridging this communication kind of gap. And also I encourage you in your own countries to make sure that whenever you meet government officials, just explaining what this agenda is about, because it's not only happening in New York, it's happening worldwide. So thank you.